Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Corinthians by Paul, dated AD 56. We're going to take a look at the internal ethics of design that is situated inside Paul's ethics of new mind. So it's either ethics of order or even better, ethics of design for all of creation. Let's begin by looking at block one. We're going to take a look at a recollection. Paul begins by saying, become imitators of me as I am also of Christ. And additionally, I persuade you that in all things keep close in recollection the ordinances that I taught you, the teachings, the apostolic teachings that I taught you. And then he goes on in verse 3 to say, and I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and additionally that the head of Christ is God the Father. So with chapter 11, Paul immediately posits an order of creation, an order of ethics, an order of design. And I got a little bit of an additional note here by MacArthur's commentary. Paul's use of paradosis refers to that which is passed along through apostolic teaching, and the principle of subordination and authority pervades the entire universe, and in his divine authority, Christ is the head of every human being. And I agree with all those comments by MacArthur. Paul begins by saying there is a divinely appointed design to creation. There's a divinely appointed order to creation, which must be given attention to by Christian ethics. Let's move on and take a look at block 2. In block 2, Paul says that for every man praying or prophesying, and if he has anything on his head, during this praying or prophesying, he dishonors his own head. And from there he goes on to, in verse 5, additionally, every woman praying or prophesying with her head uncovered dishonors her head, because it's the same thing as if her head had been shorn. And then in verse 6, if she does not cover her head, let her be shorn. And if that is disgraceful, then let her cover her head. And from MacArthur, for these particular verses, he says, and I agree with these comments, praying and prophesying represent the two primary dimensions of the believer's ministry. One is vertical, the other is horizontal. And the wearing of a head covering was a head covering with a veil that Paul was referring to. And that was a way of a woman showing her devotion to her husband. She would wear a veil to show that she was devoted to her husband. And then MacArthur's third comment, in verses 4 and 5, Paul is saying that whenever men and women pray or prophesy, they should do so with proper distinction between men and women. So men should appear as men and act as men, and women should appear as women and act as women. When praying or when prophesying, they should do so as recognizably who they are, as recognizably in the male role or in the female role. From there, let's move on to block 3. We've looked at recollection, we've looked at prayer. So now that after looking at recollection and prayer, let's take a look at coming into God's presence in block 3. And Paul says a man should not cover his head when coming into the image and the glory of God during prayer or prophesying. And the woman is the glory of man. And then in verse 8, because a man is not out of a woman, but the woman is out of the man. And then in verse 9, and neither was a man acquired through a woman, but instead a woman was acquired through a man. And if we look at MacArthur's comments here, the male was given dominion over God's created world. And then verse 10, authority because of angels. That statement in verse 10 speaks to the fact that the angels were present at creation to witness God's design for men and women, for the initial design for men and women that God put in place. And the Jewish Midrash taught that the angels are the guardians of God's created order, the guardians of God's created design. So Paul is truly emphasizing that there's a divine design to creation, there's a divine design to all of creation and all that is in creation that needs to be upheld and aligned with in Christian ethics. So we begin with this first triad of recollection, prayer, and presence. Recollection, prayer, and presence, and it is all the posited teaching and apostolic teaching by Paul that there is an original design for creation that God put in place from day one, and that includes the direction of all creation moving toward His Son, Jesus Christ. That was put into place at the moment of creation. All of creation took place through the Son. The Son is the Rhema voice of the eternal Logos. And Paul's saying there's a design in creation that we need to be aligned with at all times to be authentic in our Christian ethics. So from this initial triad of recollection, prayer, and presence, we want to look at column 4 and take a look at God's design. And it's going to be at verses 10 through 16 that'll finish up this section on the ethics of design, which takes chapter 11, 1 through 16 all together. But if you look at column 4, we'll take a look at verse 11. And Paul says, nevertheless, I say, the woman is not separate from the man, and the man is not separate from the woman in the Lord. So Paul begins by saying that mankind is a social creature. God created humanity to be a humanity that is meant for relationship between men and women. A man is not to be separate, a woman is not to be separate. They are to be social and related to each other, and that is the Lord's original design of creation. And then we look at verse 12. Paul goes on to say that for the woman is not out of the man, and the man, he says the woman is out of the man, and the man is through the woman. And moreover, all things, men and women, are of God. So again, this relationship between men and women is a design inaugurated at the very moment of creation by God the Father through the Son. It is a design of all things in creation according to God's intentionality, His teleology. And then Paul concludes in verse 16, and he says that if anyone is interested in arguing this teaching that I'm making, if anybody has a counter position, he says, I should tell you now that as an apostle we hold no other custom of habitation, and the church does not hold any other custom of habitation. Paul is adamant here. The custom of habitation, the design of habitation, has been inaugurated from day one of creation by God the Father through the Son. And Paul says there's no alternate to this. I'm telling you, this is an apostolic authoritative teaching that this design of habitation is divinely appointed. And so we've got a closing triad here at the bottom of column 4. We begin with uk kores. God's design for creation includes the provision that men and women should not be isolated, should not live separate lives. And then 2, ek tu theou, the male-female relationship is fundamentally out of God's design. And then 3, those who oppose this design are to be challenged and negated. So, human creatures are to be social. The male-female relationship is a fundamental design from the very beginning of creation, and that any opposing view is to be challenged says the Apostle Paul. So we have kind of a combination of triads here. We've got the recollection of apostolic teaching, the prayerful meditation on apostolic teaching, all of that bringing us into the presence of God. And in the presence of God, we become aware of the design of creation by the Father, and we realize that we are social creatures, that the male-female relationship was a design of habitation from the very beginning, and that is the apostolic teaching, period. So Paul is really beginning, and we saw that in the first block 1, which dealt with verses 1 through 3. Paul immediately posits what he says is a Christologically based design of creation. And he says that I want to persuade you, I want to give you this persuasive teaching that in everything keep the apostolic teachings close in recollection. Be ready to recollect and to recall the apostolic teachings that I've given you, because Christ is the Kephali head of all humanity. Christ is the Kephali. He always uses Kephali. Christ is the alignment. Kephali means the head or the alignment. Christ is the Kephali alignment of God's design for creation and God's design for humanity. Jesus Christ is the Kephali alignment of that design. That is immediate. We're at the beginning of chapter 11. He immediately says, I'm teaching you a Christologically founded doctrine. It is founded on Jesus Christ. It is founded in Jesus Christ. He is the Kephali alignment of design for all of creation and the alignment of design for the design of habitation for humanity. Christ is Kephali. That's really, you could almost say that even trumps Kateko as that first concept. You could really use the first concept for block 1 as Kephali, because it's really Kephali to Christou, alignment out of Christ, alignment of Christ. That's really what block 1 is talking about. And then how do we internalize that? We internalize it through prayer and meditation. We internalize apostolic teaching on Christological alignment by prayerful meditation on Christ as Kephali. We meditate on the scriptures that point to Christ as Kephali. Then we internalize that. And when we internalize it, then we're ready for our ethics of coming into God's presence. Then we're ready for our ethical step into God's presence in ministry and in fellowship and in cohabitation and a life according to God's design through Jesus Christ as the Kephali alignment of design. And then that initial triad leads to the second triad of the fact that Paul says we are social. We were designed, no man is an island. We were designed to be social, and that design includes not just a general design for creation, but a specific design of habitation. And the specific design of habitation is male-female. Males should remain male. Females should remain female. And that relationship is a fundamental, divinely appointed design of habitation. That's the term you can give it. Design of habitation. Divine design of habitation, I should say. And that anybody that wants to oppose this teaching, Paul says, there's no other position. That's the position of Christ, and that's the position of the church. And he says the churches of God fully support this apostolic teaching. So we get very stern, but also very, very precise teaching on, I think, generally what I should say, and what I really would want to go back to now, that essentially the whole lesson is about Christ as Kephali, head of the design of creation. Christ as Kephali, that can be your term for the entire lesson. And it does become internalized through prayer and meditation. The second moment is always critical. But that'll wrap up this lesson. We will have a recall triad to kind of consolidate the content here in our next lesson.